In this video, I want to show you a Rak'Gol Kill Team. Before we get started, this is a homebrew team that I made myself, so this isn't an official team. I have a PDF of this file down below in a Google Drive document, so feel free to download that so you can follow along with this video and play this team for yourself. For anyone who doesn't know what the Rak'Gol is, they are a minor xenos race that appear at small colonies and ships, slaughter everyone there, and then disappear. Some of them are psychers called techno shamans, who can do things like shut down technology or do body augmentation, so they can implant chainsaws and weapons into other Rak'Gol. They are really cruel and violent, and none of them have ever been captured alive, so not a lot is known about them. Their weapons are pretty basic, but they do have ships for space travel. Pretty much everything we know about them is from the Rogue Trader games, so if you've never heard of them, that's probably why. The first page is what operatives you can run. An Abomination is the leader, which are the biggest Rak'Gol, and then you get 9 Carvers, which are the equivalent of scouts for them. Then you have the Marauders, which are like the basic foot troops of the Rak'Gol. They are tougher than the Carvers, but are still some of the weaker Rak'Gol. You can trade 2 Carvers to get 1 Marauder, or a Marauder Gunner. Then we have the Render. These are the bigger and probably the most savage of all of the species. They're known for having a lot of implanted weapons, just as chainsaws instead of an arm. To take one of these guys, you have to lose 3 Carvers. As far as stat lines, they are pretty similar to the Abomination. And finally, we have the Psyker called a Techno Shaman. Once again, you can trade 3 Carvers to take one of these. Like with the new Warp Coven team, when you take a Techno Shaman, you can choose a discipline for it. Here we have Machine Distortion, Reality Distortion, and Augmentation. The next session will go over the Psyker powers. But before we get started into this, remember, this is a homebrew, so if something isn't balanced or there are spelling or grammar issues, that should just make it feel more authentic to a real Games Workshop book. Alright, so let's get back to the kill team. When each Techno Shaman attempts to manifest a power, the first one is free, but the second one you have to roll. If you did a 1, 2, or 3, the power fails and the Techno Shaman suffers 1 mortal wound, plus 2 mortal wounds for each piece of equipment it has. Since the shamans are so based off augmenting their own bodies, I thought it made sense that their augmented bodies would have some backlash if they messed up their powers. I won't go into each power, but the Machine Distortion discipline is based off of either powering up other operatives or weakening your opponent. The most unique ability here is you can turn off your opponent's equipment if they get too close. We don't have much in Kill Team that interacts with the equipment itself, so I thought that would make them unique. Reality Distortion is where you can either mess with your target's mind or use brute force and deal damage. And finally, we have Augmentation. For choosing this, you start with more equipment points so you can further upgrade your team. A big one here is Enhance Augmented Arms, which lets you remove the Unwieldy trait from weapons. Because so many of their weapons are primitive or awkwardly implanted, that trait is very common on their weapons, so some of their gimmicks will let you try to get around this built-in weakness. The next page are their tactical and strategic ploys. Almost all of these are offensive except for their augmented hides. They have the ability to do things like remove unwieldy from weapons, strike back at enemies when hit, or even have a chance to survive damage and try to get a last hit in before they become incapacitated. Then we get to the actual data sheets. The first page we have the Abomination and the Carver. Since this is the bulk in the team, I tried to make sure these were balanced by basing them off the High Fleet kill team. So the Abomination is similar to the Tyranid Warrior, and the Carvers are similar to the Swarm Fire team. The numbers would be pretty close once you trade out Carvers, but because you get more options here than the Tyranids, such as having a Psyker, hopefully it would balance out. Also, when it comes to what actual physical models to use for them, when I play them, I'll be using Tyranids right now, because the Warriors are pretty close to the Abominations, so that's the closest thing I personally own. If you know an Etsy store or anywhere to buy models that would be close to these guys, drop it in the comments below. I know there were actual Rak'Gol models at one point, but I think they're a different scale and they're hard to find. Next we have the Marauder and the Marauder Gunners. These are pretty basic, but you have a decent power up from the Carver, and you did a choice of a ranged weapon. Another interesting lore bit is that a lot of their weapons and ships are actually radioactive, so that's what the rad weapons as well as the red beam cannons are. Then we have the Render. It has a solid weapon profile, a ton of wounds, and the ability Retaliation, which means that when it's hit, it lashes out at everything within engagement range of it, including friendly models. So be careful when standing too close to one of these. While it is a big, powerful model, it doesn't have a great save, so you can pick it off from range. And finally, we have a Techno Shaman. He has 10 wounds and is the only model that has an invul save, due to his psyker powers and the armor he's implanted into his own body. The last page of this is the equipment. You have some other weapon choices, as well as some power-ups to your armor. There's also the Bionic Overdrive, which costs 3 equipment points and gives you action points and movement in return for taking damage at the end of the turning point. If you take the Augmentation Discipline from the Techno Shaman, you can have some decent flexibility to power up your team because you have extra equipment points. I thought this turned out to be really cool. Like I said before, there's a download link to the PDF in the description, so feel free to download it and send this video to your friends if you want to try this out. If you're into homebrewing and want to add something or adjust some of this, feel free to do so. I hope you have fun with this. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.